All right, let's just get right into it. Overall structure of the text. Let's read the text. Many films from the early 1900s have been lost. Oh no. These losses include several films by the first wave of black women filmmakers. We know about these lost movies only from small pieces of evidence. For example, an advertisement for Jenny Louise Toussaint. Well, this person's documentary doing their bit still exists. There's a reference in a magazine to this other person's film, A Woman's Error. And Maria P. Williams, I can pronounce that, The Flames of Wrath is mentioned in a letter and a newspaper article, and one image from the movie was discovered in the 1990s. So they've been lost. Here are some examples of that. Okay, let's see what they give us. The text identifies a complex problem and then presents examples of unsuccessful attempts to solve the problem. Well, normally I wouldn't care too much about a word like complex, but is this a complex problem? They're lost. I get it. That seems like a simple problem. Now that might be a bit of a kind of opinion judgment, and I'm not really going to get rid of choices for that. But if we look at the end, it presents examples of unsuccessful attempts to solve that problem. What were the attempts? They didn't attempt to solve the problem. They're just talking about these different movies that they know about from other sources, but we don't have the movies. So they're not attempting to solve the problem of finding them. That would be the kind of way to solve the problem of them being lost, but it's not here. So yeah. B, the text summarizes a debate among researchers. What are they debating? I don't think so. Then gives reasons for supporting one side of that debate. There's no debate. Things are lost. That end of story. Yeah. C, the text describes a general situation, maybe, then illustrates that situation with specific examples. So this feels like, I always say the SAT is trying to go out of its way not to make the right answers obviously right. This feels like a kind of very extreme example of that. The text describes a general situation. That is as empty of a phrase as you could possibly have. That's just like saying the passage is about stuff. It doesn't say anything, right? It's basically empty, but that's good for us, because then there's nothing really wrong with it. Does it describe a general situation? Yes. And it's very easy for me to then say, well, what is that situation? The situation is these films, these pieces of art are lost. So, okay, easy to check that box off. It then illustrates the situation with specific examples. It's definitely specific examples, and the examples show of things that have been lost. So that's pretty easy to kind of prove right. But I know that a lot of people are going to avoid that answer choice because they're like, well, that's a terrible summary. Yeah, a lot of times for these passages, the right answer is a terrible summary of what we read that your English teacher would yell at you for and say, you didn't do the homework, you didn't do the reading, you're just lying to get through the test or the question or whatever, the essay. But that's not the game that we're playing here, right? The point is that we're just trying to say something that we can't prove wrong, that is provable with the passage. This is very easy to prove because it says almost nothing at all. But let's look at D. Let's talk about the other side of the coin, which is proving things wrong. The text discusses several notable individuals. Yes, but it's not kind of how it starts. Then explains commonly overlooked differences between those individuals. I don't know any differences between them because I barely know them from the information we got. And commonly overlooked, that's a clear quantifier here. That's supposed to be a Q, quantifier, right? Are lots of people overlooking these individuals? I've never heard of any of these people before, so I doubt it's a commonly overlooked difference. I don't know any differences. I don't know anything. I don't know anyone who knows these people. So yeah, this is just kind of a random choice. And it definitely has words that do not get supported by the passage. So yeah, this might be a case where you're ultimately coming to choice C because you've proven everything wrong, but you're maybe reluctantly picking C. My advice is that you shouldn't be reluctant about that. In fact, when I see answer choices like choice C that are just kind of bland, that have basically removed all the detail, I'm actually more drawn to those choices because I know how the SAT is operating. I know that they're purposely stripping away all the details and making a bad summary because they don't want you to pick that answer. They want it to be at least less obvious that that's the correct answer. But choices that are weak, that say very little, are going to be easier for us to prove with the passage. And I still did that proof, but I think you have to remember that these questions are not asking you for the best summary of what's going on. They're just asking you for something that could be the summary of what's going on. And you will rarely find among the answer choices something that you think is really, really good. So you're going to have to settle. And that's kind of the point of the question. So in this one particular case, we are going to settle for less here.